Welcome to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum, Oregon's premier public affairs forum. I'm Sharon Van Sickle-Robbins, President-elect of City Club, and I welcome you all, those of you here today with us at the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB or KBPS radio, or watching on cable television. Thank you for joining City Club today, Friday, September 18th, for this week's Friday Forum. Today we welcome Dr. Paul Nussbaum, who will discuss the power of the human brain. But first, some announcements. In consideration of those sitting close to you and those in our radio and television audiences, I ask that everyone in the room who has not already done so, please silence your cell phones. As always, we offer our appreciation to our Friday Forum corporate sponsors, whose generous financial support makes these time-honored City Club luncheons possible. This is the last Friday Forum for this quarter's corporate sponsors, so let's give an especially big thanks to the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde and the law firm of Stoll Reeves. If your company or firm would like to be a Friday Forum sponsor, please contact City Club staff at the back of the room or call the City Club office. City Club has a number of timely upcoming programs, including part 2 of our 4-part series on healthcare reform, a behind-the-scenes look at the Supreme Court confirmation process, and our continuing Citizens Read book club. To learn more about these and other City Club events, please visit our website. Next Friday, on September 25th, City Club welcomes 3 distinguished architects who will challenge Portland to pursue a level of excellence in current and future design opportunities that will have a lasting impact on Portland's built environment, from sidewalk to skyline. And now to today's program. The human brain is responsible for an individual's every thought, emotion, and action. For decades, understanding of the brain was based largely on supposition, but now with tools that can measure brain activity in novel ways, brain health has emerged as a new frontier in research, and the topic has captured the public's imagination. Today's speaker, Dr. Paul Nussbaum, has been deeply engaged in that research. He earned his doctorate in clinical psychology from the University of Arizona in 1991 and has 25 years of experience as a clinical neuropsychologist caring for those suffering dementia and related disorders. Dr. Nussbaum has published many peer-reviewed articles, books, and chapters within the scientific community, and as an expert in the area of brain health and daily life, he recently published a book entitled Your Brain Health Lifestyle: Application to the School, Library, Corporate Setting, and Home. He's a national and international lecturer on brain health, healthy aging, dementia, and related disorders. Currently an adjunct associate professor of neurological surgery at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. Please help me welcome today's speaker, Dr. Paul David Nussbaum.
Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon. They said you were friendly in Portland. Holy smokes. Hey, it's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I don't have a whole lot of time, but the time that I have hopefully will be spent with some meaning for you. I do want to thank Sharon and Tom for their friendship and having some food up here and discussion with me. Thank you to Amy, wherever you are, Amy, for all the millions of emails. Amy will be lonely after today because I won't be emailing her. See, Dr. Nussbaum has obsessive-compulsive features, and he's actually quite lonely. So when people like Amy help me, I email quite a bit. And Stephen Ristow over there, who's my friend, who I met, a couple of years ago, who actually is responsible for bringing me here today. So if this completely flops, the guy's right over there. Go after him. All right? Now, I usually get 90 minutes to change a person's life, and I think I have a pretty good record of doing that. Today I get about 30 minutes, so let's just say I'm going to try to make your day. All right? Sharon was kind to go over some of what I call the nonsense about my background, which only makes a difference when I'm in a courtroom and a judge has to determine whether or not I'm an expert. Otherwise, I'd rather just have you say Paul from Pittsburgh. And there's meaning behind that, because when I was 18 years of age, I took my first position as an activity director in a nursing home, and my job was to make sure that Uncle Harry, who was walking across the parking lot who had Alzheimer's disease, wouldn't leave the lot. And it's an odd but very real experience to be in a room with someone, with family members who are crying, and the family member does not recognize the others in the room. And it's a sobering experience to have a brother who's mentally retarded with a mental age of about 3 and realize all the wonderful capacities, yet the fragility of the human brain that he possesses even to this day. And it's from those experiences, not the textbooks or the 30 pages of a curriculum vitae that I have, that I come to you today, and that I travel this great nation trying to wake up the greatest nation that ever lived and ever existed on this planet about something that's even greater, the human brain. Isn't it an interesting paradox that the greatest system ever designed in the history of the universe from this day until kingdom come, the human brain, we have just now recognized its way onto the radar screen. We are far too fascinated with the heart. No offense to any of the cardiologists in the room, but the next time you go home and you smack one on lover's lips and you say to him or her that I love you with all my heart, and this august body here has absolutely no emotional reaction to that statement, tells me that you either have GI problems or you actually take that statement as a matter of fact. There can be nothing further from the truth. Every now and then, the human animal will engage in something that I call insanity, and that gets us pretty close to insanity. You do not love with your heart. There is no heartbeat of America. You will not ever break your heart. Hey guys, on February 13th at about 11:30 at night, when we find ourselves in a place called Hallmark, looking with some anxiety and trepidation for the red-colored box, shaped like a heart, filled with chocolates to give to our loved one, we're pretty close to insanity. The good news is that with regard to policy, because we have been foolish enough to believe that the center of the world is the heart, we've actually done some good things to reduce mortality rates with regard to heart disease. At least it's plateaued. We now need to do the same thing with regard to the brain. But before we get there, we need to learn about the human brain. As smart as you are, most of you in here don't know the basics of the human brain. I guarantee you we walk out there on the street with the Homo sapiens waltzing around and they don't know about the basics of the human brain. It is the single greatest system ever designed in the history of the world. There's nothing that even comes close. And that's based on what we think it can do today. And trust me when I tell you, we don't know a whole lot. Oftentimes I'm called in to give my opinion, and I'm often asked, what is the science to back that up, as if science is the end all. Science is only the beginning. And if you think science is the end all, tell me why we don't have a cure for the common cold. We're not that good. And I think it's important to understand that humility when we approach this thing. If you have somebody like me who travels all the way across the country to come to you, to talk to you about the human brain, and he or she tells you they know something about the human brain, walk out of the room. I'm here today to tell you we don't know a whole lot. And it's from that, not knowing a whole lot, that I'm inspired to learn, to try to understand why Harry's walking out the parking lot to get away, and why Mary doesn't know her husband that she's been married to 60 years, and why my brother can only do certain things. You don't get that in a textbook. Now, the other, I think, experience that kind of shaped my career was the fact that my mother's a pretty smart Italian. You know, she's about 86, 87. You Italians in here know what I'm talking about, you know. She said to me one day, you know, I said, Mom, I got a publication, you know, which was a good thing for me because you either publish or perish, you know. So I was publishing, I wasn't perishing. And I said, you know, Mom, I got a publication. She said, honey, you know, like a good mom does, honey, I'm very proud of you, but I can't get by the title. Yeah, pretty smart lady. Doesn't understand what I'm saying to her in my paper. So I kind of came to a realization for me, and this is just for me, that I no longer wanted to publish so that other MDs and PhDs could go down to the medical library and read about the great things I'm saying. Instead, because my best guess is that your mom and dad tonight or Sunday are not going to bust down the front door to go to the medical library to read Dr. Nussbaum's latest publication. Fair? So think about that now. We got these great bastions of academic ivory towers out there, of which I'm a product, and we're producing all this wonderful knowledge, and yet nobody gets it. Because it's only the animals in the academic ivory towers that are reading it. So for me, I made a dramatic shift, which is really a dramatic shift. And when you listen to me, and when you hear me speak, and when you read what I write, it's for the mothers and fathers across the dinner tables in this country. okay? It's for your children. And if I cannot communicate that message, as complex as it may be, I haven't done my job. So that's what I bring to you today, that context. Ladies and gentlemen, Billy Gates, Mr. Dell, NASA, the military, Carnegie Mellon, Oregon State, Berkeley, Stanford. They're never going to ever build anything that even comes close to what the human brain can do, and that's just based on what we think the brain can do today, which is a significant underestimation. One day, what I call neural energies, the human brain will be able to fix the maladies of the body. We just don't know how yet. And typically when I do my presentation, I have really nice pictures of the human brain, and you know what I'm talking about. It's that kind of a convoluted, wonderful 2 to 4 pound mass that sits in our skull. If you can picture those folds and flaps that make up the miracle that is you, it's within those folds and flaps that the cure for cancer lies, and the cure for Alzheimer's, and this whole issue of world peace and getting along better. It's within the brain. We just don't know how yet. We have this wonderful fascination and seduction into believing that all the answers are outside of us. You get it in your latest iPod, or the wonderful computer that can do so many things. I think we need to expend as much energy turning inward, and we're beginning to do that, by the way. The military, if you pay attention, is starting to do studies on what I call neural energies. They call it other things, where the human brain can communicate with another human brain without opening the mouth. That appears to be adaptive when you're a soldier on the front line under fire. We have patients with ALS, known as Lou Gehrig's disease, and I've had this experience where you go in and they're laying in bed and they're actually paralyzed from the neck down. The only way they can communicate with you is they have to blink. Are you hungry? Blink once, blink twice. No. It's a pathetic state of affairs. It's an unfortunate state of affairs. It's actually a bookend of Alzheimer's disease. With ALS, you have a body that is completely decompensated and a mind that's aware. With Alzheimer's disease, you have a body that's actually miraculous. One of the problems is caregiving for somebody with Alzheimer's disease is you can't stay up with them. They will outrun you, okay? But their mind's gone. So there's bookends there. With ALS, we have a study, at least one study, where an individual who has an electrode placed on his skull, which is a fairly primitive measure, by the way, there's a lot of error there, which is then attached to a laptop. And on the laptop screen, what you have is the alphabet. And there are some reports now that have been published where an individual with ALS can actually transmit mental energy through ideas to the laptop and move that cursor over a letter, and eventually you get a sentence. I am thirsty. So I'm trying to lay down for you some of the abilities of the human brain. Has everybody seen Rain Man? We all know Rain Man. Dustin Hoffman did a pretty good job there. Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man has autism, right? Now, autism is an island of pathology, but Dustin Hoffman, and in this case, the patient had an island of brilliance, which we call an idiot savant capacity. And in this case, it was the ability to kind of mentally manipulate numbers. And his brother, Tom Cruise, who doesn't understand autism, realizes this, so where does he take his brother? Las Vegas. That's a whole separate story, but that's what he does, and indeed, they make hundreds of thousands of dollars. And my question to you is this. Who's abnormal in that situation? Is it Rain Man? Because he can count the cards and do things that a computer really can't, and they make hundreds of thousands of dollars, or are we, the rest of us, abnormal because we can't do it? Now, I had a mentor who's one of the most famous researchers in memories at Harvard now. He was at Arizona when I was there. He always told me, you only need an N of 1. That's all you need. If you have an N of 1, sample size of 1 that shows it, it can be done. So the brain obviously can do that. All right, the rest of us just don't seem to know how to do it. Doesn't mean it's not there, okay? Neuroplasticity is something that is not a new thing. Donald Hebb talked about neuroplasticity at the cells many, many years ago, but it's something that has regained some fascination for us. And the way I describe neuroplasticity is a brain that's highly dynamic, constantly reorganizing, and malleable. We had learned, probably you like me, that you have these critical periods of brain development. Phooey, nonsense, don't believe it. Throw it in a toilet and flush it 3 times. There are no critical periods of brain development. If you can't sleep tonight because I just took away from you something that was a foundation for your life development, then I would tell you this, that a critical period of brain development is called life itself. Chronological age is made up. There's nothing that specific about 0 to 6 other than you don't have many experiences laid down, so it's going to be very, very interested, your brain, in all the things that it's taking in. But my mother, who's 86, and if you have a mother that's 103, has every bit the ability to lay down new information as that 6-year-old. Okay? And you guys look at policy, I understand. Next time you look at policy and you're looking at Medicare, retirement, Social Security, I think the policy committee should try to describe to people why we use 65 in this country for those policies. I'll suggest to you that most of the Congress and probably most of the people in here don't know why we use 65. Okay? It was actually something invented by a guy named Bismarck in the mid-1800s in a place called Germany. Probably not the most enlightened way to create policy that's going to affect you and I directly. All right, but that's a separate discussion. Your brain weighs 2 to 4 pounds. You knew that. Did you know it was made up of 60% fat? It's actually the fattest part of you. Americans have a great fascination, if you ever pay attention, because I like to look at behavior, you know. I'm kind of a voyeur that way, right? We have no problem going through the buffet line and picking out the fruit. You know, I mean, we kind of puff out our chest. We want everybody to see that we're eating fruit here. We're doing good. We're doing what Nussbaum told us to do. Then we get over there by the muffins, and lo and behold, it's almost as if there's a rattlesnake on the ground. You watch human behavior, they stop all of a sudden. You know, you got these muffins as big as your table there these days, you know. And you'll see smoke coming out of the person's ears. And if you could get inside their synaptic revolution, it would be like you'd almost be thinking that, gee whiz, they must be thinking whether or not they're going to unleash the nuclear arsenal on the planet Earth, right? Should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? Dr. Nussbaum said this, Dr. Atkins said this, the American Heart Association said I should, Is everybody looking at me? I'm going to. We go ahead and eat it. What do we feel? Guilt. Hear that? That's a projective test. I just asked you a question. You filled it in. That's what they say all across the country. We feel guilt. We started off this conversation with a stinking muffin, right? So now you feel guilty, you Americans, and so what do you do then? You know, with some mania, you knock down the front door because you got to go exercise. And what are you exercising off, the muffin or the guilt? Now, I just give you that little vignette, and your laughter tells me that you can relate to what I'm saying. And my only point is that, look, we need to give some, you know, the same sort of energy to the fat in our brain. It's the fat in our brain that insulates the neural tracts, that propels information rapidly, and without it, you'll be in an elevator somewhere with Harry who comes in, your old friend Harry, and you say, hey, Harry, how you doing? And Harry just kind of looks at you. Now, remember, you're on an elevator, the doors have shut, you can't go anywhere, and you're saying, dear God, I must be on candid camera, right? It's a very uncomfortable situation. After about 10 seconds, which isn't a whole lot of time, but for an American, that's a long time, Harry says, fine, I'm fine. That's a brain we don't want. It's not propelling information rapidly. So we need to have the proper fat to insulate the fat that's in our brain and keep it robust to propel information. Your brain, every time the heart beats, 25% of the blood coming out of that one heartbeat goes to the human brain. If I have anybody in here today with a narcissistic personality, I usually have one or two. They'll raise their hands up right away. You know, I'm right here. Here I am, right here. I usually have somebody that's a little bit ambivalent, and I tell them, put your hand down. There's nothing ambivalent about narcissism. Then I had one lady in New York literally point to her neighbor, all right? And I'm sure they had a tough day the rest of the day. But, you know, your brain's narcissistic. There's a reason why we call it the central nervous system. You have a peripheral nervous system, we're not interested. It's the central. It's very demanding. Now, what I just shared with you, your brain weighs 2 to 4 pounds. It's comprised of about 60% fat. And every time the heart beats, 25% of the blood goes right to that part of you, the human brain. Now, you're a smart group in here. But, you know, a lot of the groups that I talk to maybe aren't as experienced or as smart as you. And it's comfortable for me to say about 95% of the country do not know what I just said. Now, once I teach them, they know. And it's important that you know that, because as a guy with behavior, you know, behavior on his mind, trying to change behavior, that's the hardest thing you can do is change behavior. And here's my bet that I've made in my own work. There's 2 things that I'm betting on that I can get people to change their behavior. Not 100%, it ain't going to happen. We're humans. We're Americans. It ain't going to happen. All right? But maybe we can increase it by about 40%. Number one, I have to make you personalize the message. So when I got that big picture of the brain up there and I ask the audience, and sometimes in front of audiences of like 5,000, okay, big audiences, I'll say, what is this? And everybody yells, brain. Say, well, technically you're right, but I'd rather you say, that's me. Okay, that's me. I want you to personalize the message. Alzheimer's disease is the presence of neurofibrillary tangles and deposits of amyloid and probably the presence of genetic markers like apolipoprotein E. You with me? Who in the world's with me? What, are you kidding me? You know what Alzheimer's disease is, friends? It's a brain that's lost access to its life story. The most precious gift you have. So you got to personalize the message. Second thing you have to do is you have to be told why yo-yos like Dr. Nussbaum are telling you to change behavior. You can tell me what to do to avoid a heart attack, to minimize my risk of a heart attack. Anybody in this room, staff, people that are eating the food here as a guest, the media professionals here could tell me what to do. You know what to do. Why don't we do it? Why is obesity going through the roof at age 4? Why is diabetes going through the roof? Because we don't tell them why. That's my fault. That's probably my field's fault, okay? So I just gave you the why. I told you your brain's made up of 60% fat. I'm going to tell you what to eat here in a little bit. I told you your heart beats, 25% goes right to the blood, or to the brain. That's why I'm going to tell you to be physically active, okay? And if you do those two things, I think chances are going to be higher that you are going to be able to change your behavior. Now, to give you some sense of how difficult it is to change behavior, have a little fun. I mean, tough economic times, right? So we'll just bet a nickel, okay? I'm going to bet you a nickel, and I don't even know you, that you cannot sit at a different spot at your dinner table for the next 7 days. Every day. All right. See the animals in here, not much emotion. That's all right. So you got me. You think, I got you, Nussbaum. Okay, let's double down. I'm going to bet you a dime now. Next 7 days consecutively, you cannot sleep on a different side of the bed. Okay, you hear the animals now are stirring, all right? Now we're digging in. It's getting serious, you know. You're thinking, dear, I had one guy yesterday or Monday Tuesday when I did a talk here in Portland to some financial folks. He said, what are you trying to advocate divorce? I said, no. You want to have a whole lot of fun tonight? Just move the trash can in your kitchen. You know, all heck's going to break loose. You're going to have Kleenex all over the floor. People are going to be screaming. You know, those are not life-threatening challenges to changes in behavior, friends. So when we start talking about what I believe to be very important, and probably the most important thing, more important than medication, supplements, more important than shots, liquids, it's lifestyle. I'm the lifestyle guy. Okay, that's my story. You ain't going to change anything unless I can get you to personalize the message, and I tell you why. Then maybe we'll get 40% behavior change. Pretty good number, 40%. It's a good number. My lifestyle program that I believe in, based on my reading of the research, involves 5 slices to a brain health pie. One is socialization, one is mental stimulation, one is physical activity, one is spirituality, and one is nutrition. Okay? Those are 5 slices. It's based on research that came out in the 1950s when we discovered that the rodent, of all things, actually can demonstrate some very positive things when you place the rodent into an environment that's called enriched, relative to rodents placed in an environment that's called unenriched. 1950s we knew this. This is a fact. It's not an opinion. I got interested in that, and I wanted to know, what do you mean, you know, these scientists, famous scientists. In fact, the one lady, Dr. Diamond, did the autopsy on Einstein's brain. He's down at Berkeley, wonderful lady. Well, what they meant was, by an enriched environment, is, number one, animals had to have other animals of its kind in the environment. That's socialization. The animals raised in isolation, that was not an enriched environment. 2, the animal had to have a running wheel to run on. That's physical activity. 3, the animal had to have toys in the environment to interact with. That's called mental stimulation. We take those 3 things, remember I told you, socialization, physical activity, mental stimulation, we apply it to the human model, and I included 2 more. One was spirituality, based on some research that we know about what stress does to the brain, and the other was nutrition, because we have literally changed our DNA and genetic makeup based on what we eat. There's a whole new field called nutritional neurosciences. And there's a whole new field called neurotheology, by the way, literally, studying how the brain appreciates a higher being. What happens when we introspect with regard to our body. Okay? That gets us into the whole neuroenergy thing I talked to you about earlier. So the reason that becomes very powerful is because we learned in 1998, for everybody out there, the listeners and everyone here. You know, think about that. What a wonderful time to be alive. 1998, a study came out in Nature which showed that the human brain can actually generate new brain cells. What in the world we were thinking between the 1950s when we showed that the rat brain can do it, and now that the human brain can do it, I don't know, but that's a separate, you know, sometimes we just don't have the methodologies yet, okay? But lo and behold, we discovered not only can the human brain develop new brain cells, but it was precisely in the same region that we knew the rat brain did it. The hippocampus. Everybody say that, hippocampus? Hippocampus. The hippopotamus went to camp, okay? Hippocampus. If you came in here today and if Sharon gave you a sheet and said, hey, everybody, you know, in order to get your food, we want you to write down the 3 most important parts of your body, is it fair to say you guys would not have written down the hippocampus? Okay, when you leave here today, from this day forward till your last day, and all the little ones in your life story, educate them about the power of the hippocampus. It sits deep inside each temporal lobe, which we call it that because it's just under each temple. The hippocampus is the structure that takes in new information. You hang on to it. If you think it's important, you hang on to it forever. It is a thing that we believe at this point in time, in 2009, generates new brain cells when exposed to the proper environment. It's also the thing that gets hit very early with Alzheimer's. What happens with early Alzheimer's? Mom or dad keeps repeating. Why would they keep repeating? They can't learn new information. The hippocampus is broke. So if you can't learn new information, guess what you're going to do? Repeat. Where are you going to repeat from? The information that was stored many years ago, up in the top parts of the cortex, which is a word that translates to mean the bark of a tree. It's the outer part of the brain. Okay? We also learned that stress can do a damaging thing to the hippocampus. When you place animals in an environment where there's chronic stress, the animal does damage structurally to the hippocampus, and they have memory problems. We think the same thing may occur for humans with what's called post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay? So stress, which is a proliferation of hormones, some of which are steroid in nature, does damage to that hippocampus. So to me, again, talking to mom and dad across the dinner table, it sounds to me like the hippocampus is saying to us, give me a loving, nurturing, positive environment. I will do wonders for you. Give me a damaging, punishing, life-threatening environment. I'm not going to be very, very functional for you. Okay? So there is this very important interplay between the environment and the structure and the function of the human brain. On a very practical level and personal level, in the morning of 9/11, 2001, you all woke up, and I make the argument, without any science, that you were forever changed neurologically, neurochemically, and neurofunctionally or behaviorally. And, you know, I get interested in that kind of thing, and my question is, how? What happened? I mean, literally, you did probably what I do, what you did this morning, what I did this morning. We woke up in our huts or our mansions or our condos or our assisted living buildings like I did, called the Hilton Garden Inn, and you probably turned your TV on. And by the way, you were probably pretty driven to go get your coffee because that's a whole separate neurochemical thing, right? You got to get your coffee. And you watched something horrific on a TV screen. Horrific. And it forever changed us. And my point is, there's no pill there. And there's no syringe. And there's no liquid. But it changed us. And that's why today you don't hear much of a debate, which you heard pre-911, about what your kids should or should not be watching on TV because it has no effect on their behavior. We know better now. The American Journal of Pediatrics has taught us otherwise in terms of correlations, not cause and effect. But you take adolescents and have them watch a lot of TV during the day, sexual behavior increases. ADD increases. It's not cause and effect, but there's a relationship there, okay? So that's sort of something to tell you that your brain is changing all the time. It's being absorbed and being shaped by environment, and your brain is shaping the environment. And that's the power of neuroplasticity. Now, what does the research tell us with regard to socialization? These are not my opinions, okay? It's completely objective, unbiased. This is not Dr. Nussbaum talking to you. This is a regurgitation of what research tells us. We know, particularly as we get older, if you isolate and segregate, you will have a higher risk of developing dementia. Most of you know what that is. That's a fancy word that means a loss of intelligence, memory problems, loss of function, personality change, and functional disturbance relative to where you began. It's important to ask your loved ones, are you lonely? When was the last time you asked somebody that question? Bizarre question. And wouldn't it be nice if the people that were lonely would stand up and say, excuse me, Dr. Nussbaum, before you go forward, I just wanted everybody in here to know I'm lonely. I'll be over here in the back, right here, lonely. Big L on the forehead. It's not the way it works, okay? So we have to ask. And clinicians now, based on a study in 2007 that found a correlation, again, increased loneliness correlates with an increased risk of dementia. Not Alzheimer's per se, but dementia. There's about 100 types of dementia. Alzheimer's is the #1 type. So we got to ask that question. Mom or dad, are you lonely? You know, a brain that's lonely is a brain that may be with 100 people, but is emotionally isolated. If you got a dad or a mom who's physically isolated, increased risk for Alzheimer's. Got to get them out into society, okay, the same way the rats were in their enriched environment. You know, I'm one that does not believe in retirement the way it's currently positioned. Retirement is a tricky thing because you got a lot of people that have a tremendous amount of momentum and almost like manic behavior to get out of where they are. I literally have people come up to me, Dr. Nussbaum, yes, I've got 3 years, 6 weeks, 7 hours, 4 minutes, and 2 seconds, and I'm the heck out of here. Where are you going? I don't know, but it ain't here. Okay? The psychology of retirement is this. You have today. What are you going to do with it? That's all you got. That's all I got. You understood that on the morning of 2001, September 11th, because your first impulse was get the kids, the grandkids, or find out where lovey-dovey is, or you weren't thinking, you know, I've got the HR meeting at 2 o'clock. Your name tag didn't matter. You know, the mission statement on the wall that's usually a 2-paragraph thing that sits behind a ficus tree didn't matter, okay? You were in the here and now. Why does it take a crisis to get to the here and now? Dr. Weil, who's the big bushy-haired guy that always kind of shows up on Larry King, says that, you know, you Americans, you want to live a long, healthy life, which is what people say. They don't say, Dr. Nussbaum, I want to live a long life. It's usually that word healthy in there. Weil says, well, you got to breathe. You got to learn how to breathe. We don't even know how to breathe. Dr. Snowden, who does the nun study, fascinating research on the brains of nuns who tend not to get Alzheimer's disease, says you got to walk. You want to live a long, healthy life? Walk every day. It's an academic debate, but I would say you better have a role and purpose for getting up each and every morning. You better not go ask your HR office what that role and purpose is. Most of you don't know what your role and purpose is while you're waltzing around the planet Earth. You got to discover that for yourself, because if you don't have a role and purpose, you ain't going to want to walk. You sure as hell heck ain't going to want to breathe. But we haven't taken the time to figure out what that is, okay? So retirement is a kind of a psychological retirement, I think, is very, very important. Why are you here on the planet? Each and every one of you in here may have already done great things. I mean, look at you. But I think there's tremendous potential with each and every one of you that has not been tapped, and I don't really care what your age is. That's all made up anyway, okay? But we got to turn inward to figure out what that is. Look at me here today. I didn't go to school to do this. All right, it wasn't in my curriculum. Public speaking to the leaders of Portland. How about mental stimulation? Let me tell you what the foundation is for brain health. The foundation for brain health is something called brain reserve. Everybody say that, please. Brain reserve works this way. If you think about the core of your body as the core of your brain cell, of which you have trillions, coming out one side of that brain cell is something called an axon. It's a long fiber. It's the thing that gets insulated by the fat. And it takes information from the core of the brain cell out from the brain cell into the environment, trying to connect with other brain cells, okay? The other side of the brain cell is called a dendrite. They're sometimes described like branch-like figures. I talk about them as finger-like projections. And if you don't have to do this right now because we're on screen. You don't want everybody to see you doing this. But if you can kind of sort of metaphorically just imagine in your head everybody raising their hand, waving at me like I'm waving at you, and then imagine if I would ask the audience to raise their other hand. Now everybody's 10 fingers are waving around the room. Boy, we got a lot of fingers waving around the room. And it just multiplied from 5 to 10. That's the picture I want you to have in your head with regard to what happens when you expose your brain to an enriched environment. You will multiply the dendritic branches that are seeking other connections. And some tell us maybe each brain cell can have 10,000 connections. You multiply that by 1 trillion brain cells that's within a system that's not fixed. It's not a gigabyte issue here, you know. I mean, it's pretty impressive. Here's the power of brain reserve. When you build up that kind of cellular connectivity and increased brain reserve, we think it delays the onset. And right now I'm choosing my words as carefully as I'm in a courtroom. It delays the onset. I didn't say prevent. I didn't say cure. It delays the onset of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. Professor Snowden, who was at Kentucky, I've lost where he is now, but he's still out there studying some of this. So are some others like Mortimer and Marilyn Albert and some others. At autopsy, we have brains today diagnosed with Alzheimer's. There's no question. The neurofibrillary tangles are there. The plaques are there. We, in a medical case conference, they'll look at that, get the neuropathological report, and then they'll come to somebody like me and say, Dr. Nussbaum, please tell the august body here when Mrs. Jones first manifested the disease. She never did. So there's silence, and they say, Dr. Nussbaum, you must be goofier than we already thought you were. Could you please tell us when she manifested? She never did. And we have a significant number of brains, even though neuropathologically the diagnosis of Alzheimer's is present at autopsy, never manifested the disease. Do we know why or how? No, but one of the speculations, the leading theories, is that when you look at these individuals' lifestyles, they were such that they were building up tremendous brain reserve. And so that's critical, and that is the altar, the foundation upon which anything you hear from this day until your last day with regard to brain health sits. It's the building up of brain reserve, okay? So with mental stimulation, the important two words there that I've been teaching is complex and novel. You know, if you want to know what is complex and novel for you, take out a piece of paper, divide it in half. On the left-hand side, tell me the good things that you do. What are you talented at doing? Those are the things that you probably do. It's human behavior. You get your ego stroked from it. You think you're pretty good at it. You're talented at it. You are. You're better than most. So what you do. It's also not as hard anymore. Now we go to the right side of the page. Tell me what you stink at. I got them. You got them. We all got them. You know. Those are areas of our brain that have not been nurtured, literally, neurophysiologically. Literally are retarded. I mean that literally. That's where the novel and complex is for you. That's why lifelong learning is so important. That's why, from a policy perspective, I have written and talked about lifelong learning being part and parcel of any healthcare package we come up with in this country. We ought to incentivize everyone to continue learning. Why? Because we're losing our shirt on the back end with dementia. And if everything that I'm saying right now is true, learning becomes every bit as important as you eating. Yet we create silos in this country where you're only allowed to go to that thing called a brain health center. No, it's called a school. K through 12. That's not true, Nussbaum. You get to go 4 years to Portland State University. All right, what happens after 4 years? Imagine if I told you at 39 you're no longer allowed to use the grocery store anymore. Okay, I mean that's, you know, we're not the most enlightened animals on the planet sometimes with regard to our policy. We're really not, all right? We have to encourage learning. Learning is a fundamental health issue. There should be no Department of Education and Department of Health. They're the same thing. Learning is health. People with higher levels of education have a lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. People with higher scores with their job. Every one of you in here has a score next to your job. Did you know that? The Department of Labor, God loves them, gives you a score. And they've done epidemiological studies, and they follow these different occupations to see what happens to these folks in late life. The higher the score, supposedly the more sophisticated environment that you expose your brain to, quite often, the job, the more brain reserve you develop, the less likely it is you're going to get Alzheimer's disease. People say to me, my dad had an MD and a JD. Dr. Nussbaum, he got Alzheimer's disease. What are you talking about? I say to him, without that MD or the JD, law degree, they would have manifested the disease many years earlier. It's that environment that helped to push that disease off quite a bit, you know, for that person. Reading and writing, very, very important with mental stimulation. Sign language, even for babies that cannot speak orally, can learn about 20 signs. Prior to a baby being able to speak orally, they can learn about 20 signs. You don't believe me? Go rent the movie Meet the Folkers. Okay? And you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, the reason that that's important for today, that's pretty cool if I just stopped right there, but the reason that's important is if you follow those kids out relative to controls who are not exposed to sign language, by the second grade they have a higher IQ. Why is that important? They're going to be the valedictorian? Maybe, but that's not what I'm interested in. A higher IQ in childhood reduces the risk of Alzheimer's disease later in life. I'm sure this body has talked about poverty. Did you know poverty in childhood increases the risk of Alzheimer's disease? I'll guarantee you there's not a whole lot of discussion of that out there when we talk about poverty. What's poverty? It's an unenriched environment. That's what it is. Okay? Travel reduces the risk of dementia. When you get in your car and you go home today, you already have the mental map worked out. You will not use your cortex. Okay? You're going to be doing all the stuff we do, which is pretty much subconscious when we're driving, friends. Which is, geez, oh man. Phone goes off, we're talking, we're telling the kids in the back seat to please be quiet. Some of you are texting while we're driving, right? Don't like the radio station, got to change that. You're yelling at the guy next to you, throwing a nonverbal at you. And somehow we get safe where we're going. Okay, now you come to me in Pittsburgh and I say, you were very nice to me. I'd like to take you to dinner tonight. I'll meet you up at the George Washington restaurant on Mount Washington about 7 o'clock. Godspeed. Cortex is firing now, man, right? So travel, and I think that was the New England Journal of Medicine, found that that's a behavior that reduces the risk of dementia. So does knitting and gardening, believe it or not. Now how might that? I don't know. But I think one of the things that we might think about with knitting, gardening, and dancing, which is a physical activity, is that we use both sides of our body. When we use both sides of our body, we're stimulating both hemispheres, and we've been seduced in this country to only use one side of our body. Some of you in here were punished for using your left hand in school. Think about that. That's like somebody saying, how dare you use your non-dominant hemisphere? Quit doing that. Okay. Physical activity. 25% of the blood goes right to the brain. That's why aerobic exercise in a series of studies has been shown to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease. That's why walking is so critical. That's why from a policy perspective, if Portland wants to be the enlightened city in the nation with regard to brain health, everybody should have pedometers. That's a little gadget you put next to your nightstand at night and says, yoo-hoo, Paula, you need to start walking. About 10,000 steps a day, 30 minutes every day, not consecutively. This is what the research tells us. Okay? And it does enormous things, not just for the brain. Dance does reduce the risk of dementia, pattern dance. If you go to my website, which is, by the way, just paulnussbaum.com, which is a lot of free information there, you'll see a little article on the tango from the medical research field looking at this stuff. Okay? Physical activity. We talked about walking, dance, intimacy. That's a healthy behavior, provided you've got two consenting adults, right? Intimacy can be a very positive behavior. So a lot of it is that relationship between the cardiovascular and the heart and the brain. How about nutrition? Well, we told you that the brain's made up of 60% fat. We know we need to eat omega-3 fatty acids. Now, mom and dad across the dinner table think I just swore at them. Omega-3 fatty acids. That doesn't resonate. So you may know what that means, but that really means the fatty fish. And if you look at the development of civilization over time, going way back, when did we develop our most creative, sort of enlightened parts of civilization? It was when we were near water, because we're probably eating a lot of fish relative to when we were landlocked. And in fact, it appears that that's when our brains grew disproportionately relative to when we were landlocked. 3 servings of salmon per week has been shown to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's. But other fatty fish are good too: mackerel, herring, tuna, sardines. Omega-3 fatty acids can be found in nuts, unsalted walnuts in particular. When we were cavemen and women, we were eating 1 good fat for every bad fat. Today we eat about 15 bad fats, 20 bad fats for every good fat. We were supposed to eat sticks and leaves and fish and lean game and berries and fruits. We were never supposed to eat probably what the agricultural revolution gave us, foods from animals. And we certainly weren't supposed to eat the fast food industry. Yet, my 13-year-old asked a good question the other day: Daddy, why does a McDonald's, a Burger King, and a Wendy's set up next to each other? The better question would be, Daddy, how do they not go out of business? It says something about us, Las Vegas continues to grow. McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's can be set up within 30 feet. Nobody's going out of business. In fact, when we were all losing our shirts and stocks, if you had McDonald's stock, that apparently kept going up. And we have CVS stores going up everywhere. It says something about us, okay? The other, no value there, judgments, just says something about us. The other thing with regard to food, when you use utensils like you did today, when you sit and converse with maybe strangers like you did today, This is a very brain health promoting activity because when you use utensils relative to using your fingers, you eat less, caloric restriction, very good, and you eat healthier. If you're a boomer like me, you're usually in a minivan going to the 13th event on Tuesday night, the 14th of which is called homework, by the way, and so we got to eat in the car. Very different activity, okay? Finally, with spirituality. The brain needs to be in rhythm. We have a very good way of getting it out of rhythm in this country. Stress has an adversarial impact upon the brain, particularly chronic stress. It will impact memory. It will affect the structure of the hippocampus. Animals exposed to environments that are too stimulating, their brains stop developing. It's probably fair to say we're going too fast in this country. So I'm a real advocate to teaching relaxation procedures to our kids in school. Why in the world are we not taking 5 minutes before the math test and letting the kids go through a relaxation procedure in the classroom? If learning is the outcome, why do we have situations where we're scared to death before we take our tests? Meditation has made its way into Western civilization. Some of you may be experts in meditation, certainly better than we were 5 years ago. It's going to continue to grow, and as I say, there's this whole field called neurotheology, and prayer is important to the well-being of the human being. 95% of our physicians indicate prayer is important to the overall well-being of their patients. Interestingly, I have not seen the prayer for the prescription for the Our Father or another prayer. One thing I can tell you is, I know I'm getting close here, Alzheimer's disease will rob you of everything but two things, friends. Your ability to love and your ability to appreciate a higher being. And this is not textbook stuff I'm giving you right now. If you want to come with me home on a Wednesday, we'll go together to this nursing home where I go, and we walk in and they send me into the locked unit. It turns out Harry's urinating in the vent system. And Mary's throwing the pills around. And Dorothy over there, she's punching the nurses. And Billy, well, Billy likes to walk down the hallway with the pants around his ankles. And they call me in to help as if I know what I'm doing. Well, one thing I've noticed when we take them off the locked unit and we take them down into a room like this, and, you know, on the walls I notice in these buildings, faith-based institutions, there's religious symbolism, and then in walks a Homo sapien with religious garb on. Interesting observation I've made over my years. This person that was on that locked unit can sit still like you for 35 minutes and do things that are very appropriate, like recite prayers and hymns. And people say to me, Paul, it's just overlearned information. I say, I'm sorry, Chuck. He doesn't know his name. I can't explain it with all my learning. So my only point is we don't have medications that do that. And the only side effect is I got to take them back to the locked unit. Now, those are just some examples in my short period of time here from a lifestyle perspective that we can do. When I talk to, by the way, the education system, I talk to them about getting kids to move around in the classroom because movement increases learning. When I talk to librarians, library associations, libraries are brain health centers. You watch the Homo sapiens go into those buildings like we watch our kids go into the schools. What's being stimulated? The big toe? No, the brain. We need to think differently, okay? When I talk to policymakers about the power of brain reserve and begging these healthcare insurance companies and the federal government to get lifestyle for the brain to be part and parcel of everyday activity, it becomes paramount. Let me finish this way. Every year in this country, we lose at least $100 billion, that's with a B, and that's an underestimate, on the care of people with Alzheimer's disease. We've got about 5 million today, probably another 5 million are at risk, and that's going to shoot up to 3 times that in the next several years. We're completely not ready, okay? We spend about $30 billion every year. Corporate America loses $30 billion because you and me, quite a few of us in this room, have somebody who's got Alzheimer's disease in the life circle. And we have to leave work. And we're getting sick, and we're getting depressed, and there's costs associated with that in terms of quality of life and healthcare dollar cost utilization. What is the number for the fact that somebody in here today has a father or a grandfather who has not been able to speak to his or her grandchild for the past 10 years? Sitting next to each and every one of you in here today is an invisible bag. It's been there with you your whole life. Perhaps your parents didn't let you in on the secret. I'll give it to you now. It's always been with you. And in the invisible bag, what you do each and every day is you place life experiences. And you're building up your wonderful autobiography. I call it your life story. It's the most precious gift you have. And if you go with me right now to your twilight, which may be today, and the sun is setting, and you're going on to a better place. Just prior to that moment, a little one walks up to you in your life circle, your child, your grandchild, your great-great-grandchild, right? Takes you by your hand, looks you square in the eye, and says to you, "Share with me your life story. I want to know." And it's been my simple experience across this great country that the quiet in this room right now is an indication to me that you've personalized the message. That right now, this very moment, on this day, in this great city, in this great country, it's not about disease, neurofibrillary tangles, it's not about policy, it's not about your name tag, it's not about where we are, Dr. Nussbaum. It's about you. And that's where it has to begin. And so what I try to do today with you is to show you we're not perfect. We don't have all the answers. But there is a pathway that we can say until we get the magic bullet, take this road. Engage in the novel and complex. Create as much brain reserve as you can. Create enriched environments in your home, place of work, and at your school. And when you do that, the little ones in your life circle who look to you because you are their hero will do the same thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The first question for our speaker, as always, will be from our Board of Governors host. Our board host today is Tom Cox. Tom is owner of a management consulting firm specializing in improving the productivity of technology teams by imparting leadership skills. Tom has been an active City Club member since 2003. Tom?
Dr. Nussbaum, thank you very much. One of the things that fascinates me as a City Club member is I'm kind of the token Republican, and so I travel in a different, I have a different set of facts apparently than a lot of my colleagues. We don't disagree on policy, we disagree on what reality is. And I'm wondering if there's anything in brain science that helps us understand the way in which we select which facts to accept and which to reject, and what that tells us about the future of civic engagement.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm really never shy to say I don't know. I think, first of all, and I just wrote a blog actually, that I think with political philosophy, which is born of a lot of life experience and teachings from people like our parents perhaps, and how we perceive things, there are differences in brain approach, brain perception. Perhaps someone would be too analytic, stay too much to the facts, perhaps another person, and derive political philosophy from that. Perhaps other people would see not so much the facts, but use words such as empathy, compassion, which are hard to analyze and put numbers and things to, so they would have a different political philosophy. Say the same thing about marriage. And as I was telling Tom earlier, corporate America loses thousands, if not millions of dollars every year because we've got animals in the hallways called men and women that are not communicating very well. So I say that to say this: if we respect that there are differences, I think if we can bridge via communication and appreciation of how the brain may be processing those differences, that may be one pathway to come to at least some term of understanding. Doesn't mean you're going to change people's minds, but it might give us a better understanding of why there are differences rather than calling folks names that I've heard on both sides of the aisle. I'm not picking on one party or the other here. I think that's the best I can do, Tom.
We will now take questions from the floor. Asking questions at Friday forums is a privilege of City Club membership. When you ask your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less.
Jim Zarin, club member. I'm fascinated by your comments about 9/11 and how, as a society, so many of us took in that information via television, most of us, and how it probably changed us forever. And I'm thinking sort of in a public policy context about maybe similar events. Historically, I've always been curious about the Nuremberg rallies with Hitler. I think of the JFK assassination weekend. And I think for many people, the Grant Park appearance by Barack Obama on election night. I wonder if you can just say more about what you think might be going on individually and sort of societally when we share things like that.
Yeah, Jim, I think that, first of all, I'm a firm believer in environment has an enormous impact upon our thoughts, behaviors, sometimes motives. And not everybody agrees with that. I mean, we're not even beyond that yet. As I say, not too long ago, probably in the past decade, I don't know if you remember, we had serious debates up on Capitol Hill about whether or not the television programming affected our kids' behavior. You remember they brought in the TV executives and the movie executives. So we haven't even gotten literally beyond that yet. But, leadership comes in many packages. And the ability to communicate and the ability to stir emotion will change behavior. Osama bin Laden, Adolf Hitler, our presidents, whatever your favorite leader is, your favorite coach, Vince Lombardi, okay? They're appealing to parts of our thinking and emotion and probably connecting on both sides of our brain that stir up us to move. That's what leadership's about. So I think the first part of my answer would be that it can be good, it can be bad, but it will affect the motives of humans, including kids, which is why you see a correlation between kids raised in environments where there's domestic violence. They go on to do what? Domestic violence, okay? What we have to do as a society is understand that and then try to propel the goodness. Because if we can stir goodness, it has long-standing impact.
Liz Riley, City Club member. You've mentioned a number of choices that people typically make that are really not in our best interest. Do you see a time where the brain might evolve so that it actually makes choices that are in our best interest? It's
a good question. The one that comes to mind right now, which isn't necessarily adaptive, is a disease, a disorder called narcolepsy, which is immediate sleep. If you don't sleep, your brain gets really mad at you enough, and you have to have enough deep sleep, which is a whole other issue with school, which is, I don't know about your kids, but my kids are getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. If you can get a frosted flake into their mouth, it's a miracle. And, despite the fact that we've learned that kids that eat anything in the morning do better in school, we seem to create school days around the staff rather than the kids. It's interesting. So that's one example. I think, we'll probably get to that point. We're not there yet. But I think the brain has a way of reminding you what it wants. And in fact, a lot of what you eat sometimes is your brain telling you, I'm a little bit deprived over here of this. It's not random in a lot of ways.
Kurt Wavering, member. Your talk about brain reserve reminds me of my mother who died at age 94, still doing the Sunday Times crossword puzzle in ink. And so I have, a high expectation of me. But my question is, I've seen ads by Allstate Insurance Company talking about teenage drivers and saying that there are things like the development of forebrain which are not complete, and so we should, their policy implications is to limit the number of other kids in the car, perhaps delay nighttime driving and things like that. So I'm wondering what you think about that application of brain. I presume it's based on brain science.
Yeah, the frontal lobe continues to develop well into the 20s, and my kids will be the first to kind of be mad at dad again, but 16-year-olds should not be driving. I had a conversation yesterday with some folks. They probably, little kids, your grandkids, your kids shouldn't be playing football until a certain age. And they probably shouldn't be playing soccer. I've got an 12-year-old that's going to be playing soccer here probably right now back in Pittsburgh. Here's the thing with soccer, imagine if I told you, this fits to, I think, what you're saying, Kurt, because the frontal lobe's developing, okay? Imagine if I said to you, hey, everybody in Portland, this is what we're going to do Monday and Wednesday. What we want all the kids to do in Portland is to wake up and create 3 activities where we'll go protrude their forehead, their frontal lobe, at a missile coming at it 30 miles an hour, because that's fun. That's soccer. Okay? Now, we can get around that if we become enlightened with this is not expensive stuff I'm giving you here. Okay? And I don't need PET scans or anything to give you this answer. Number 1, the kids should not be driving when they're 16. Number 2, if the kids are going to go out on a soccer field, they're going to want to headbutt because that's cool. You have to understand. So let's give them headbands that are the coolest thing. Now, 5 years ago when I tried to get this to the National Soccer Association, Pokemon was the kind of the cool thing. I don't know what the cool thing is now for kids. But whatever that cool thing is, put it on a headband, so that they can do those kinds of things. I'm not a big advocate of football because it doesn't make sense to me to, you have a concussion, you're at risk for another concussion, and a concussion increases your risk for Alzheimer's disease later in life. One other quick thing. We got time for one more, Sharon? This little device I have here now in my ear, it's better than you, or particularly your child, putting the cell phone up right next to the ear. What does the research tell us? It tells us we don't know. What don't we know? We don't know if cell phone use and the microwave radiation that's used there into the ear of that child's developing brain is related to an increase in the onset of brain tumors. There's a guy named Dr. Black, who's probably the most famous neurosurgeon, one of the most famous neurosurgeons we have in our country, who's saying he doesn't let his kids, and he tells all his patients, no Bluetooth, no cell phone up here. This is what we need. Now, it takes behavior change. Am I perfect? Are my kids perfect? Nope. I yell every day at my kids to get this thing in their ear. Does Dr. Nussbaum wear this 100% of the time? Nope. But I'm doing better. So I would just encourage you as a policy, and when I get back home, I'm going to make sure I send a little email to our superintendent. Hey, I don't know the fact on this, but if I'm wrong, everybody make fun of me. If I'm right, or if Dr. Black's right, better said, please use the wire. Yes?
I'm sorry, we've run out of time for further questions, and we'll have to stop for this week. Please join us on September 25th for a discussion about Portland's built environment. And as we close, please join me in expressing our appreciation for today's speaker, Dr. Paul Nussbaum. We're adjourned.